morning. We have an incredible communicator, and I have watched Darlene from afar for the past 15 years, and I can say with all of my heart that I truly admire who she is, not just in her career, but as a woman of God. I know that she's one that seeks the Lord and that has journeyed through many ups and downs in life, but knows what it means to honor the Lord. So Darlene Crowder is going to come and share with us today. She'll share where she works and what she does, but let's just be receptive. Get your pencils out or your, pens, whatever it is, because she has a great word for us today.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for this privilege. I do work for Foss Maritime Company. We're a maritime logistics provider. If you've lived in the Pacific Northwest for any period of time, you might think about our iconic green and white tugboats that are out on Elliott Bay. But we work all up and down the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, and we move those big container barges that you see come in. We are essential workers, and we also have businesses in Alaska and Hawaii, and we move maritime cargo all over the world in dangerous countries, in adverse climate, and we've been in business this year 132 years. So we're one of the oldest businesses in Washington State. In fact, we were founded the same year that Washington State was founded, 1889. So we've been around a while, and it's been a privilege to be there. I've been there for about 7 years, and I've been in human resources for a little over 30-something. And I am the Vice President of Human Resources at Foss Maritime. So it's a privilege to be here with you today. And if you've been around here at Eastridge for any period of time, you've heard Pastor Steve and our other pastors use a phrase that is extraordinarily profound. And that is that, some of you can finish it with me, all quality ministry flows through relationship. That's right. And I can only attest as an HR professional and as a follower of Jesus Christ that this is true over and over again in our workplaces as well. It worked. I'd like to invite you to embrace this teaching time today through a metaphor. My dad was an amateur photographer, and he had quite a collection of cameras that I inherited. And he taught me that the f-stop, or the focal stop, was the control for the aperture opening on how much light you let into the frame. Some of you that are photographers know that already. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you have been in the workplace for more than 5 years? You can keep them up. More than 10? More than 20? More than 30? All right, I'm going to stop there. If you have been especially in the secular workplace for any period of time, you can attest with me that the spiritual aperture has indeed narrowed. Narrow apertures let in less light. And I see this more in human resources than perhaps any other area of the company. What is permissible, what's legally compliant, what's politically correct anymore. Oh my goodness, it has narrowed the openings for sharing Jesus considerably the last couple of decades. And I've been in the workforce since the 80s. But there's good news for us as Christian business leaders. There are some strategic ways that we can get our light through still, and we're going to talk about those today. These are the big ideas we're going to cover, both from a business and a spiritual perspective. They are simple but profound. The good news is that these leaders are practices that are not only best practices in our workplace, they're actually expected of us as leaders. And for those of you who may not be in the workplace right now, hang in there. This applies to all of us. These are human relational strategies that work if you are a neighbor, if you are a parent trying to talk to your child, if you are a grandparent shaping grandchildren, if you are a community member, if you're a volunteer. These apply to all of us. So I'd like to start by talking about the first idea, and that's recognition and acknowledgement. Everyone likes to be rewarded and recognized appropriately. Let's be honest, we all appreciate being recognized. How many of you use traffic navigation apps on your phone? Okay. Not only for navigating to where you're going, but perhaps some of you use it to actually record a road hazard up ahead, or a policeman that you've spotted, or a speed trap. And when you do, it's oftentimes the case that other motorists will give you a like or a thumbs up. And what does that do for us? Let's be honest, we just appreciate being appreciated. You're never gonna meet these other 10 motorists, but they've just appreciated the fact that you've helped them. Similarly, what happens when you go on vacation and you book travel at an Airbnb? You go, you have a wonderful time, you come back, and you diligently file your review on the condo or the accommodations and the host. You write down your experience, and then they do likewise. Darlene was a wonderful guest. She kept the place spick and span for me. She was communicative, welcome back anytime. I get a lift when I hear that, and I'm never even gonna meet this host. It's rare that we meet our hosts when we stay in vacation homes. Stats here. Gallup tells us that employees who don't feel recognized are twice as likely to leave within a year. From Deloitte, we learned that engagement, productivity, and performance are 14% higher in workplaces with recognition programs. And from Willis Towers Watson, we know that recognition increases employee engagement by upwards of 60%. That's significant. That brings favor into our workplaces and drops to the bottom line. How many of you are fairly confident of what kind of recognition programs, if you're in the workplace, that you have available to you? Show of hands. Okay, great. I'm not going to ask you to show your hands now, but how many of us actually take full advantage of those? I'm going to talk about just a few small ways that are significant. And it doesn't have to be much. Let's start with the very, very simple, something that I've resurrected during COVID. Thank you notes. Simple, old-fashioned maybe, but do you know when you walk through a workplace, how many people have those thank you notes posted up around their cubicles or their workplaces? Do you know that I even have a folder at home in my file cabinet of thank you notes that I've received over the years? They mean so much to us. And the good news is, it's free, and it does so much. Taking this one step further, have you considered sending a thank you note home to a spouse? Or maybe a small gift to the children of someone who's worked particularly hard during a period of time? What about an email to the employee and copy the CEO, thanking them? Free, absolutely free, and it does so much to connect with that employee. Second, small gifts. Once COVID is over and we're back in the workplace, cup of coffee in the morning, flowers, movie tickets, something small and tangible that's really what our accountants call de minimis. There's no cost really to it, but again, does so much to advance that relationship. Next level up, company awards. Employee of the Month program, parking spots, discretionary bonuses. Know what you have. I can tell you as an HR professional, these programs are far underutilized. I would be oh so happy to tell managers that at some point, you need to stop, we've gone over our budget. I have never said that in over 30 years. The last one is career advancement and succession planning. How many of you know what this is a picture of? You can raise your hand. Okay? Yep, it's Jerusalem. I want to tell you a story. I called a young woman not too long ago who is in our succession plan. We go through an annual process at FOSS where we identify key positions and people that we need to backfill and train and grow to take those positions so that we're not left leaderless in the future. And we create development plans for that person. Not goals that they fulfill to meet company objectives, but we create goals around their own personal development. This is about what can we do for you. I called this young woman up and I told her, I said, let's create this development plan together. You are a high potential person and we value you. Oh my goodness, aperture opened wide. And then she said, but Darlene, can we do this again, like in another week or two? Because I got a last minute opportunity to go to Israel and I'm going tomorrow. And I said, Israel? I said, I've been to Israel. And she says, you have? She says, oh, please, please. She says, I'm leaving tomorrow. I didn't have any time to do any research. What was your favorite thing? Do you have any recommendations? Oh my goodness. Again, the aperture is wide open, and I felt the Holy Spirit just say, go. And so I told her, I'm almost brought to tears by this, because on day 3 of our tour, we finally made it into Jerusalem proper, and we got to this overlook called Mount Scopus, for those of you that have been there. And it's a beautiful panorama of the city and the Temple Mount. And I started to tell her that I was so moved when I got to this place because our leaders that were with us, they read the passage in 2 Chronicles where Solomon dedicated the temple. Beautiful long prayer. Read it, it's beautiful. He gets to the end of the prayer, Solomon does, and he prays for the foreigner who comes from afar off. And he says, oh Lord, he says, answer their prayer. If they come and pray at this temple, answer their prayer, hear from them, hear from heaven, so that all the world will know you are Yahweh. I'm telling this to this person over the phone who is my, colleague. And I'm just sharing it. And I said, and I know that he has been answering prayers in my life. And she's just like wide open book for me. And I didn't plan this. I was ready in season. And it just came up organically. But it was all because I called her about succession planning, and I was recognizing her in actually a very practical business way. Let's look at the spiritual application. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you're doing. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. A word fitly spoken, I love this verse, is like apples of gold in settings of silver. And let me tell you this, whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. I promise you, you pour out, it will be returned to you. Your cup will be full like you can't even imagine. Let's go on to the second big idea. Feedback. Feedback can be informal, it can be formal. Feedback can be constructive in nature, it can be positive in nature. I'm going to talk to you today briefly about feedback in the context of 4 C's. 4 words that start with C. Current behavior, and I say current because it needs to be timely, not 4 or 5 months down the road. Context in which the behavior occurred, consequences, and change required if you are trying to transform something. So let's touch base on formal feedback just for a moment. How many of you have had or have formal performance review processes in your organizations? Maybe annual reviews, focal reviews on your anniversary, or maybe end of the year, okay? Business leaders and some companies have shied away from annual reviews recently in favor of more frequent check-in processes. There's kind of a debate about that in the HR world. But I'm somewhat agnostic as long as regular and consistent conversations are occurring. Research done by the Corporate Leadership Council has found that informal feedback conversations with staff can actually, throughout the year, lead to an increase in 25% performance metrics and up to 35% increase in retention. Wow. 25% increase in performance. That's like having another whole employee. When you've got 4, that's like having 5. And so amazing, and that again brings favor into our workplaces and drops to the bottom line. Estimates are that only about 1/3 of us, if we're managers, are effective at delivering informal feedback. So how many of you have millennials around you working? And what do we know? What have we heard? And there's nothing wrong with this, but we know that millennials are driven by wanting to make a difference, knowing that they're contributing. And if we don't get good at this regular and consistent feedback, I can tell you personally, I've seen a few of them come and go out the door within about 12 months' time because they're not getting that feedback, even though they're actually contributing. So let's begin with the first two C's of good feedback: description of the current behavior and the context. And I'm going to read a couple of examples for you, one that's positive praise and one that's constructive in nature. And I want you to listen for those two things: a description of the behavior and the context. Let's start with praise. LaShawn, every one of your deliveries has been on time without any type of safety incident, and you've met or exceeded customer expectations for the last 9 months. Keep up the good work. Did you hear it? Current behavior description, context in which I saw it occur. Let's listen to a constructive feedback. Marco, you have seemed disinterested and disengaged in department meetings over the last 2 to 3 months now. I've seen you bring your tablet into meetings, and your eyes never connect with anyone else, and you're not providing any kind of commentary in the meetings. This is a change for you, and I need that to turn around. Did you hear it again? Current behavior, very objective, nothing judgmental, just the facts, and the context in which I heard it. Let's move on to the third C. Good feedback includes the consequences of the behavior or the performance that you are trying to manage or influence. Let's listen once again to praise-based feedback first. Hey, Jess, your proactive reporting of the malfunctioning control room equipment helped us with the OSHA audit. Even though it was noted in the auditor's report, we weren't marked down for it, and that's because we already had it recorded with parts on order. Thanks to you. Consequences. Why does it matter? Cause, effect. This works with our children. This works with our grandchildren. What did you do and what was the effect of it? And now let's listen to a constructive example. Terry, I'm concerned that your failure to meet agreed upon deadlines not only impacts those of us on the project team, but it adversely delays our overall project timeline. And that may lead to our missing a timely RFP response deadline, and that may lead to our missing out on this work. Do you hear it? Again, cause, effect, facts, objective. Last C, change required. If you're focused on improvement and transitions for someone, I want you to listen for how I phrase this. June, the next time you're feeling frustrated with a coworker, I'd like you to do this. Take a deep breath, acknowledge their question or their concern by repeating back to them what you hear, and if that still doesn't work, ask them politely if they would like to go and speak with you with a supervisor. You know, some really stubborn performance problems, and I've seen a few in my 30+ years, are really best addressed by being this direct. Again, was I judgmental or harsh? No. But it's human nature, and I've seen this too, as managers and as people that are trying to influence change, to take a softer, more subtle approach. And that's fine, maybe your first or second time around when you're coaching, but if you're not seeing the change that's needed by the second or third time around, you're going to be best served by being very explicit about your expectations going forward. Another great phrase our pastors say, you can't expect what you don't express. So say it, but figure out how to do it in love. Couple of closing remarks on performance feedback. In July 2019, there was a Society for Human Resources Management study across the United States, and it found that over 40% of all employees say their manager fails to frequently engage in honest conversations about the work. We need to speak the truth, and as Christian business leaders, we can do it in grace. That's the good news for us. And I can tell you this, both positive and constructive feedback open the aperture. I'm going to tell you a story about the negative in just a minute. Suffice it to say that employees are going to be more honest or more open to changing their behavior if we deliver it tactfully and if we think about it in advance. If people get defensive, they're not going to hear what we have to say. This is one of my favorite souvenirs from my career. It's a thank you note. It's a thank you note from a medical provider who I had to help terminate their employment. This was several years ago. And it was a competency issue. They worked in a high acuity level of the hospital, and they just, despite retraining, job shadowing, good feedback like we've been talking about, they just couldn't get there. So we had to bring their employment to an end. I continued to try to assist this person through the outplacement process, and we continued to dialogue via email, via phone. And a few weeks later, I got this thank you note saying, "Darlene, thank you. You helped preserve my dignity in that process." Oh my goodness. Someone whose livelihood that, may have just been crushed. Long story short, we continued to talk, continued to dialogue. And through the course of a number of conversations where we just kept open, she ended up coming with me to Eastridge, to several church services. Amazing. You wouldn't think that that's possible. But again, when you follow these precepts and we're honest and we open that aperture wide, just see what the Holy Spirit can't do and who he wants to use. Spiritual application. Do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters. Wow. Great instruction from the Word of God, right into our workplaces. And Jesus, all throughout the Gospels, I tell you the truth, Jesus did not pull any punches. He said the truth, and he was direct, but he was loving. And then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. How freeing. The last big idea today is how to open the aperture, and that is just be present. Show up. How do we be present? Go where the employees are. Go where your family is. Go where your neighbors are. Go where your community is. Go to them. At FOSS, safety is a cornerstone of our business. We have an inherently dangerous work environment where fatalities can and actually and unfortunately have occurred. So for those of you with any kind of health, safety, quality, or environmental responsibilities on your job, we know that leadership site visits are a leading indicator of safety performance, not a lagging indicator. FOSS works with a bunch of big oil majors, and we have ample research that proves that the positive impact of a leadership site visit can really help safety performance and our march to zero incidents on the job. Between 2017 and today, we made a goal as leaders to make 10 leadership site visits a year to our various locations. And we said that we would get aboard vessels, we would go to work sites, and we would talk safety. Even I was doing that. In HR, I did have to use crib notes a little bit, but I did talk safety. And despite COVID last year and that little blip where we really couldn't do that as much, in this period of time, our OSHA recordables went down by 42%. And in that same period of time, we saw a plummet of 54% in our lost time incident rate in that same time period. So again, for those of any of you in the safety realm, you know that those are big numbers, significant numbers. There's an old adage, and finish it with me. Folks don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's so true. I'm going to give you 3 good reasons for on-site visits and being present. Going builds awareness. We gain direct feedback and knowledge that we could have never gained secondhand. Don't get me wrong, Teams and Zoom have been great this last year, and I'm thankful for them. But we also get to share information out with our company when we do that. And we build personal credibility when we show up and have the human-to-human relationship and conversation that we need to have. I know it's hard. It's hard to get out of our office. It's always hard for me to book that plane trip and go. But every time I do, I'm so glad when it's done and over with that it just meant so much to me, and it always fills my cup back up. Number 2, it increases communication. There's no substitute for being present and listening, right? Digital tools, social media, again, they're all great, but they just don't replace that bedrock of human communication. Number 3, creates trust. It sends a message when we show up in person that every part of the organization is valuable. Every person is valuable, and they matter. And wow, you took the time out to come see me? Wow. And when times are tough in our companies, when we go through difficult things, whatever those may be, maybe even like a year we've had this last year, it conveys a sense of shared responsibility and shared ownership over those issues in our workplace. And again, I'm going to tell you, going reinvigorates us as well. I promise you that. The spiritual application about showing up. And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues. But when he saw the multitudes, he had compassion on them. And then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray you, therefore, the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into the harvest." As we look to the word in Jesus' example, we see clearly he went to them. So in closing, these are just 3 ideas for moving light forward in our spheres of influence, in our workplaces, in a time where the narrowing aperture just keeps closing smaller and smaller and smaller. The good news? Again, these are not only good practices and best practices and good management techniques. These are actually expected of us if we're people managers. I love the end of the fruits of the Spirit verse, Galatians 5:23. We read the list of the fruits of the Spirit, and then it gets to the end and it says, "Against such things, there is no law." I always thought that was kind of curious. But as a human resources professional, with everything that's shut down in the last several decades, I see now there's nothing against love and gentleness and peace and kindness. And these are ways to make those connection points. And it's real. And I just think it's so clairvoyant that the Lord put that part into that verse. Against such things, there is no law. Several years ago, my family had professional photos taken at Lincoln Park in West Seattle. And as the day dawned for the photo shoot, it got drizzly. It was overcast, and I was really skeptical that we were going to be able to go forward with this photo shoot. But the photographer said, "No, come on, just come anyway. It's going to be fine." And so we complied. We showed up on the beach, and she said, "Come at dusk. It's the best lighting of the day." And so we said, "Okay, we'll show up. We'll show up then." The result was a successful portfolio of just really beautiful photos. They were crisp and vibrant and just everything that I had hoped for family photos. And it was really all because we listened to someone who knew how to capture the best lighting and set the best aperture for the circumstances. Friends, we've shared some best lighting tips today in our workplace. And when our team members are at both their best and at their worst, that's when the aperture is the widest open. These moments are often when their hearts are supple, and the Holy Spirit has prepared that ground, that fertile ground for us to just step in there at the right time with the right words. He's been so faithful. So if you felt like me in HR, or not in HR, constrained or stuck or just hand-tied with some of these things that we are seeing happen in our world around us, take heart. Many of you business leaders, I know you face tremendous business challenges. You're working M&As, maybe divestitures, capital equipment expenses, safety, customer satisfaction. The list goes on for you. And I know, because I've seen you in my workplace and in other workplaces, I've seen you go at these decisions strategically. Let's do the same as we face a continually narrowing aperture. Let's be savvy, let's be strategic, and let's widen the aperture in our workplaces by building effective relationships so we can shine the light of our Jesus Christ. Thank you.